Here's the thing about humans. They're weird, but not in the typical way. I don't mean the usual. Oh, look at those funny bipeds with their strange obsession with fermented grain juice. Kind of weird. No, it's something a bit more subtle than that. Oh, where are my manners? I should introduce myself first. The name's Jackson Torak, Senior Military Analyst for the Galactic Coalition. I've spent years studying battle tactics from 17 different sentient species across 12 star systems. I've written lengthy dissertations on the hunting strategies of the Ziphians and Kroganth and the defensive formations of the crystalline Vernons. Not to toot my own dorsal horn, but I'm somewhat of an expert when it comes to interspecies combat strategy. Yet no matter how much I've studied, humans still manage to baffle me. You're obsessing again, Jackson, my colleague Olivia said, blinking all four of her eyes in that offbeat way she does when she's amused. Your neck frills are twitching again. I smoothed down my frills with a three-fingered hand, giving her a pointed glare across our shared office. I'm not obsessing. I'm observing. There's a difference. You've been staring at the same security footage for 3 rotation cycles, she pointed out, gesturing toward my hollow screen. And yes, she was right. I had indeed been replaying the same clip from yesterday's Galactic Security Council meeting over and over again. What's so fascinating about a bunch of diplomats arguing over trade routes? It's not what they're saying. I paused the footage and zoomed in on the far corner of the chamber. It's where they're sitting. In the back, as always, were the human delegates from that backward mudball they call Earth. They were clustered together in the furthest corner of the grand chamber. They'd arrived early, just as they always did, choosing seats along the wall, far away from the central platform where the Drathian ambassador was droning on about reduced tariffs on dilithium exports. So they liked the cheap seats, Olivia snorted, and I could hear the plants on her desk rustling as her breath made its way across them. What's your point? My point, my dear Quorath, I said, is that they always pick those same seats, a back corner near an exit with a full view of the room. I tapped my stylus thoughtfully against my jawline ridges. Did you notice where Ambassador David sat during the emergency evacuation briefing last month? Can't say that I did because, unlike you, I'm not a creepy stalker, she laughed. Back wall, left corner, next to the service corridor, I said. And before that, at the centennial celebration, their whole delegation sat along the perimeter of the banquet hall. Not one of them sat in the central area, where all the important dignitaries were. Maybe they're just antisocial, Olivia suggested, turning back to her work. Or shy, or gasp. Maybe they just like those seats. I flicked my tongue in annoyance. The devourers of Trilix's 7 are antisocial. The gaseous clouds of Nirans are shy. Humans, I paused, struggling to find the right word. Humans are something else entirely. Olivia rolled all 4 eyes in unison. You're being ridiculous. They're barely Category 3 on the Galactic Threat Assessment. No natural armor, no significant toxicity, no enhanced strength or speed. They can't even regenerate lost limbs for void's sake. That's what makes it so strange, I insisted. They're practically defenseless by any reasonable standard. Their only real advantage is their unusual endurance, but that hardly matters in modern combat. I let the sentence hang in the air, my gaze fixed on the footage again. One of the humans, a woman named Madison Taylor, briefly made eye contact with the camera before turning back to the proceedings. Was it my imagination, or had there been a knowing glint in those flat, non-compound eyes? You give them too much credit, Olivia said dismissively. They're novelties, Jackson. Amusing little creatures that somehow stumbled onto faster-than-light travel before figuring out how to stop killing each other over imaginary territorial lines. The Coalition only admitted them because they have unusually plentiful water reserves and make surprisingly good pastries. I grunted non-committally. Perhaps she was right. Maybe I was reading too much into it, seeing patterns where none existed after all. It wouldn't be the first time my analytical mind had led me down a wormhole of speculation. But still, something about those strange, soft-skinned humans from Earth nagged at me. They were like an equation that didn't quite add up, a tactical anomaly I couldn't quite explain. And in my experience, anomalies were either meaningless flukes or the most important factor you'd overlooked. I was determined to find out which category humans fell into. The incident at the Galactic Summit for Interstellar Cooperation happens once every 12 standard cycles. It's the diplomatic equivalent of one of those grand cosmic supernovas. Rare, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Every sentient species sends their most important representatives, which means the room is filled with more inflated egos than a pufferoni during a mating display. Naturally, I was there, though not as a participant, void forbid, but as part of security oversight. My job was simple: watch for threats, report anomalies, and try not to die of boredom, while Ambassador Hunter of the XKai Collective droned on for the 14th consecutive hour about proper mineral rights etiquette. "Kill me now," muttered Senior Diplomat Max beside me. His crystalline form glittered under the chamber's artificial lighting as he subtly adjusted the arrangement of his facets. "If I have to listen to one more word about the sacred nature of tungsten deposits, I'm going to shatter myself," I chuckled, though I kept my gaze fixed on the grand chamber the summit was taking place in the famous Hall of Convergence on Nexus Station, a vast amphitheater-style room with concentric seating rings encircling a central speaking platform. The most prestigious delegations occupied the innermost rings, with the status of each species gradually diminishing the farther out you went, and there, in the outermost ring, pressed up against the back wall, sat the humans, 4 of them, looking almost comically small next to the towering Valkyrie beside them. As usual, they'd chosen seats near a service exit, backs against the wall, with clear lines of sight to all the major entrances. "Still obsessing over the monkeys?" Max asked, following my gaze. "Humans," I corrected, my voice automatic. "And I'm not obsessing. I'm analyzing." "Sure, whatever helps you sleep through your Dorsey phase," he snickered. I was just about to retort with a particularly cutting insult when the first explosion shook the room. It wasn't a massive explosion by any means, but it was enough to obliterate the main entrance and send a cloud of debris into the chamber. Before anyone could react, the emergency lights flickered and failed, plunging the room into complete darkness, save for the faint glow of various bioluminescent delegates. Then the chaos hit. The Vuon emitted their high-pitched alarm shrieks. The Valkyrie activated their defensive plating with the sound of grinding metal, and the gaseous Nirans expanded in panic, nearly suffocating the Orzane next to them. Even Ambassador Zelnor of the Drythian Empire, the fiercest warrior species in the galaxy, flipped over his chair, scrambling for cover. "What in the 7 moons is happening?" Liam's voice rose in pitch, his crystalline form vibrating with fear. "Unknown," I answered, my voice steady despite the growing panic. "Possibly a terrorist attack." Then a second explosion rang out, this time from the secondary entrance. More screams, more chaos. The chamber guards were trying to regain control, but they were quickly being overwhelmed by the frantic diplomats. That's when I noticed something strange. The humans weren't panicking. In the flickering emergency lighting, I could see them clearly. They had moved, but not in the disorganized, fearful way the other delegates had. Their movements were deliberate, purposeful. 2 of them had taken up flanking positions by the exit door. One, the woman, Madison Taylor, had pulled out a small device and was scanning the room. The 4th, a man whose name I couldn't recall, was calmly speaking into a communication device while drawing what I recognized as a compact human weapon from beneath his formal attire. "By the void," I whispered. They were prepared for this. A third explosion hit, and a dozen armed figures in unmarked combat suits poured in. Mercenaries, or perhaps terrorists. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were swift, well-organized, and clearly intent on taking hostages. The room went still. The lead attacker's voice boomed through a voice amplifier. "The next species to twitch so much as an antenna gets vaporized." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint whimpering of a young Vernon diplomat whose crystalline appendages were beginning to crack from the stress. "That's better," the attacker said. "Now we're looking for—" I never found out what they were looking for. At that exact moment, the lights went out again. But this time, it wasn't because of the attackers. In the new darkness, I heard something I'll never forget. 4 distinct clicks, followed by a human voice, calm, almost bored, saying, "Well, this is awkward." What happened next would forever change my understanding of humanity. The observation. 3 days after what galactic news outlets had started calling the summit incident, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by hollow projections of security footage. Not just the footage from the attack, though I had replayed those recordings around 73 times, but also from dozens of diplomatic functions over the past standard year. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," Emily remarked, entering with a nutrient sphere that pulsed with an unappealing green glow, the telltale sign of processed algae. "Have you even gone through your dormy phase at all since the attack?" "No time," I muttered, quickly swiping through the footage. "Look at this." I expanded one recording, showing the human delegation at the Proximan Trade Conference. Same pattern, back of the room, clear view of the exits, backs against the walls. So they're creatures of habit, Emily commented with feigned enthusiasm. How riveting. Fascinating, I echoed, more seriously than she intended. Now, can you explain why you've become even more obsessed with them after they literally saved your life? I flicked my tongue in irritation. They didn't save my life. They neutralized a terrorist threat that happened to be within my proximity. Right, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. And Ambassador Madison Taylor personally escorted you to safety while her colleagues were busy disarming bombs and subduing mercenaries. Coincidence? Madison, I corrected absent-mindedly. Ambassador Madison Taylor. And yes, I believe it was just tactical expediency. I pulled up another recording. Here, the Centaurian Ballet reception. Take a look at where they're standing. Emily sighed dramatically. Jackson, the entire coalition is talking about how 4 unarmed humans took down 12 heavily armed attackers without a single casualty. The Drethians are embarrassed. The Sithar Queen is demanding an investigation into how humans managed to acquire combat training that rivals her elite guards. And you're still obsessed with their seat preferences? It's all connected, I insisted, my frills extending with excitement. Can't you see? They knew. Somehow they knew something was going to happen. It wasn't just quick thinking. They were prepared for it. So you think they had inside information? Emily asked, her antennae twitching with concern. No, I said, trying to organize my thoughts. I think they're always prepared. Look at the pattern. They consistently position themselves in the best spots for both observation and a quick exit. They always have clear sight lines to every entrance. And at the summit, they were armed, subtly, but they were definitely armed. Emily paused, considering it. So you're saying? I'm saying, I responded, my voice firm with conviction. They've evolved to expect danger. I had to understand, and that's how I found myself sitting across from Aiden Harrison, Deputy Human Ambassador to the Galactic Coalition, in a quiet corner of the diplomatic lounge later that day. Thank you for meeting with me, Ambassador Aiden Harrison, I said, studying him closely. Aiden was a tall figure for his species, with skin the rich color of fertile soil and a completely hairless head that gleamed softly under the ambient lighting. His face stretched into what I recognized as a smile, though there was something in his eyes, something watchful. Please, call me Aiden, he said, taking a sip from his container of stimulant liquid, coffee, as I recalled from my research. No problem at all. After what happened at the summit, I'm getting used to being popular. Yes, about that, I said, activating my recording device with a flick of my wrist. Your actions during the incident were remarkable. Aiden shrugged, a peculiarly human gesture that conveyed nonchalance as if downplaying the whole thing. We got lucky. Right place, right time. Except it wasn't luck, was it? I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. You positioned yourself strategically. You were armed at a diplomatic function. You responded with trained precision to a crisis that left species 10 times your size paralyzed with fear. For a moment, Aiden fell silent. His eyes, alien yet strangely familiar, locked onto mine with unsettling intensity. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, like water trickling over rocks. You've been watching us, he said, not quite asking. I nodded. Professionally, I clarified. I'm a military analyst. It's my job to notice patterns. And what pattern have you noticed, Analyst Torb? He asked, his tone more playful than serious. I paused, choosing my words carefully. That humans always put their backs to the wall. That you always know where the exits are. That you're always ready. Aiden's smile shifted, becoming something older, sharper. Ah, he said softly. You've noticed that, have you? I took a deep breath, not willing to let the moment pass without addressing it directly. So, you're telling me, I said, staring directly at him, that this behavior is instinctual? Aiden's face did that peculiar human thing, flashing multiple micro-expressions in quick succession. Amusement, caution, assessment. Human faces were incredibly complex. Not entirely, he replied, finishing his coffee. It's more of a cultural habit, reinforced by training. Look, he continued, why don't I authorize you for access to some of our basic military history? Nothing classified, just publicly available information that might help you understand. I tried to mask my eagerness. That would be professionally valuable. I'm sure it would. Aiden replied, giving me a strange, knowing smile. Check your data access in about an hour. True to his word, by the time I returned to my office, my authorization level for Earth's historical database had been upgraded. I immediately dove into the information, ignoring Emily's concerned comments about my unhealthy fixation on the humans. What I discovered kept me awake for 3 consecutive dormant cycles. Earth's military history was shockingly extensive, far more so than I had expected. While most advanced species had a period of martial development before achieving global cooperation, humans had never known peace. Not once in their entire recorded history had their planet been at peace. This can't be right, I muttered, cross-referencing data points. They've had weapons capable of planetary destruction for over 300 cycles and still haven't unified their governance. Even more baffling, their combat development hadn't followed the typical path. Most species developed increasingly centralized and formalized military structures as they advanced. Humans, however, had developed that, yes, but alongside it, they had evolved an entirely separate track of asymmetric warfare and guerrilla tactics. I pulled up footage of historical Earth conflicts, watching in fascination as small, seemingly insignificant groups of fighters outmaneuvered, and sometimes even defeated, larger, better-equipped forces through superior positioning, ambush tactics, and environmental awareness. "Analyst Torb," a voice suddenly interrupted my research trance. I looked up to find Director Victor KNX looming in the doorway, his ceremonial eye stalks quivering with what I recognized as administrative displeasure. "Director," I greeted, standing. "I was just researching the humans." "I'm aware," he said, his primary mouth twisting into a grimace. "Your colleague Zell has expressed concerns about your focus since the summit incident." I smoothed my neck frills, trying to project professional composure. "Sir, I believe my research has significant security implications for the Coalition." Director Victor KNX settled his massive frame into the reinforced chair across from my desk, which creaked ominously under his weight. He didn't seem to notice. "Explain," he ordered. I quickly organized my thoughts. Humans exhibit combat readiness and situational awareness far beyond what their Category 3 threat classification would suggest. Their historical development on Earth has produced a species that never stopped evolving combat tactics. While we, as a coalition, were busy developing philosophical frameworks for post-conflict societies, humans were perfecting the art of threat assessment and rapid response. The director's secondary eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting they pose a danger to the Coalition?" "No," I said quickly. "Not at all. In fact, quite the opposite. Their actions at the summit saved numerous lives. But I do believe we fundamentally misunderstood them." I pulled up a series of architectural diagrams from Earth. "Look at this. Even their recreational buildings, restaurants, entertainment venues, educational facilities, all have multiple exit points, emergency protocols, designated security features. Their entire civilization is designed with a constant awareness that danger might appear at any moment." The director observed this silently for a moment. "Most species outgrow such paranoia," he noted. "That's just it, sir," I replied. "For humans, it's not paranoia, it's adaptation." I displayed a human evolutionary timeline. Their planet is extraordinarily hazardous. They evolved as both predator and prey, simultaneously. They were never the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armored species on their world, so they developed acute threat perception and response mechanisms. I showed him footage from the summit attack. "Notice how Ambassador Madison Taylor keeps scanning the room. That's not some random habit. Humans refer to it as maintaining situational awareness. It's taught across their military, law enforcement, and even to their civilian population in certain areas." The director remained silent, his multiple brains clearly processing the data. "And this habit of positioning themselves with their backs to the wall?" he asked. "A tactical fundamental?" "Yes," I confirmed, bringing up a new file. "It's called the Cooper Color Code, named after one of their military theorists. It's a system that tracks awareness levels. White for unaware, yellow for alert, orange for focused on a specific threat, and red for engaged in combat. Most species in the Coalition operate primarily in a white state during diplomatic events. Humans? Never. They maintain yellow awareness, always alert and prepared, yet appear calm and at ease." I showed more summit footage. "They sit at the back of the room because it offers the best vantage point. It minimizes blind spots, provides a clear view of exits, and offers quick access in case of emergency. Throughout history, controlling your environment and maintaining escape routes was often the difference between survival and death. Fascinating, the director murmured, his digestive tentacles curling slightly in interest. But if they're so combat-focused, why haven't they shown any expansionist tendencies since joining the coalition? I paused, considering the question. That, I don't have an answer to just yet. But I have a theory. Humans have something they refer to as the sheepdog mentality. The majority of their population are sheep. Peaceful, cooperative, nonviolent. A smaller portion are wolves, predatory, and dangerous. But a crucial third category exists: sheepdogs. These individuals possess the same capacity for violence as the wolves, but they use it defensively, not offensively. I leaned in, meeting his gaze. I believe the humans working within the coalition are their sheepdogs. They are always vigilant, not because they seek conflict, but because they are wired to protect. The director was silent for several long moments, considering. An interesting theory, Analyst Torb. Continue your research. I expect a full report by next cycle. Once he left, I turned back to my screens, a strange mix of professional satisfaction and personal unease settling in. If I was right about humans, the implications were significant. We had always categorized them based on their physical abilities, failing to recognize that their real strength lay elsewhere, in their constant, instinctive readiness for a universe that might turn hostile at any moment. I began pulling up more data, determined to understand them further. The revelation. I was dreaming of Earth when my communication unit jolted me awake. Not that I had ever been to the human homeworld, very few non-humans had, but after immersing myself in their history for days, my subconscious had constructed a vivid simulation. Towering mountains, vast oceans, and predators lurking in the shadows. In the dream, I was a primitive human, constantly watching, waiting, listening for danger that could emerge from the darkness. Analyst Torb? I croaked into my comm, my voice thick with sleep. Jackson, thank the void you answered. Emily's voice rang through, unusually high-pitched, definitely a sign of distress. There's been another incident at the Coalition Embassy on Proxima Station. Get down here now. I snapped to full alertness. Casualties? None, that's the weird part, the humans. What, just get down here. 20 minutes later, I was stepping through the secure entrance of the Coalition Embassy, flashing my military analyst credentials at the guards. Inside, the scene was controlled chaos. Security personnel from multiple species rushed about, scanning equipment while the center of the commotion held Aiden Harrison, standing unnervingly composed in what humans called a suit. Analyst Torb, he greeted me, as if we were meeting for a casual drink rather than in the aftermath of a major security breach. I had a feeling they'd call you in. What happened? I demanded, noticing the cordoned-off area behind him, where specialists were examining what appeared to be a disabled explosive device. Aiden's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Someone left us a present. Fortunately, we found it before the event started. I processed this information. The diplomatic reception? But that's not for another 3 hours. 5 hours and 17 minutes, to be precise, he corrected, glancing at his wrist with a faint smile. We always arrive early to check the venue. You sweep for explosives before every diplomatic event? My voice held a note of disbelief. Aiden looked genuinely puzzled. Don't you? Before I could answer, Director Victor KNX lumbered over, his primary eyes locked onto Aiden, while his secondary eyes turned toward me. Ambassador Aiden Harrison was explaining how they detected the device, the director stated, his tone flat. Apparently, his security team includes individuals trained in pre-event venue assessments. It's standard procedure. Aiden shrugged nonchalantly. Madison noticed the catering staff seemed off by one person compared to the manifest. Ambassador Thoron thought the lighting fixtures had been adjusted since yesterday's briefing, so we did a sweep and found the device. Just like that. The director's tone made it clear he found this suspicious. Just like that. Just like that, Aiden confirmed pleasantly. I couldn't keep myself from blurting out. You're not surprised, are you? Any of you. You expected this. For the first time, Aiden Harrison's eyes met mine with something resembling respect. Not this specific threat, no. But we operate under the assumption that threats are always present until proven otherwise. That's insane, the director rumbled. The cognitive resources needed to maintain such constant vigilance are far greater than the resources required to recover from an attack. Aiden finished smoothly. Exactly, Director. Would you excuse us? I believe Analyst Torb and I need to have a private conversation. Surprisingly, the director inclined his massive head and stepped away, leaving me alone with Aiden. "Walk with me," Aiden suggested, motioning toward a quiet corridor. As we moved away from the chaos, I noticed we were heading toward the embassy's observation deck, a circular room with transparent walls, offering a stunning view of the space station and the starfield beyond. The room was currently empty. "No one else is here," Aiden noted. I watched as Aiden smiled. "Good situational awareness. You're getting the hang of it." "Why did you bring me here?" I asked, still unsure of what he was planning. "Because it's defensible," he replied casually. "One entrance, clear sightlines, reinforced walls. And if things go south..." He gestured toward an emergency exit pod built into the wall. "Options." "You think we're in danger right now?" I asked, alarmed. Aiden chuckled softly. "I always think we're in danger, Jackson. That's the point you've been missing." He moved toward the center of the room, gesturing for me to sit opposite him at a small table. "Humans have a concept called hypervigilance," he began. "In some contexts, it's viewed as a psychological disorder, an unnatural state of heightened alertness. But what's considered inappropriate depends entirely on evolutionary history. And humanity's history? It made hypervigilance appropriate." I nodded, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. "So, hypervigilance is a survival instinct for them." "Bingo," Aiden said, his finger pointing at me with that signature human gesture of confirmation. "Earth is beautiful, Jackson. Breathtaking, really. But it's been trying to kill us since day one. Predators, natural disasters, disease, even other humans. We evolved in an environment where relaxing our guard meant certain death." "But don't most species go through similar evolutionary pressures?" I countered. "The Drethians evolved on a planet with gravity twice as strong as Earth's, and atmospheric toxins that would kill most species instantly." "True," Aiden said, his tone calm. "But they evolved to be the apex predator. Their response to threats was to grow stronger, more resilient." He leaned forward, his expression sharpening. "Humans couldn't do that. We weren't the strongest, the fastest, or the most physically resilient. So we developed other advantages: pattern recognition, threat assessment, cooperative defense strategies, and relentless awareness of our surroundings." He gestured to the stars visible through the transparent walls. "When we moved into space, we brought those instincts with us. In diplomatic settings, we sit at the back of the room, not because we're shy or unimportant, but because it's the position that gives us the most complete view of the environment. We can see everyone, and very few can see us without turning. We control our exposure, maintain access to exits, and preserve our options for response." I sat back, momentarily taken aback by the simplicity of it all. "So the back of the room isn't the worst position. It's the best one, from a security standpoint." "Exactly," Aiden nodded. "The most powerful and important species in the coalition tend to place themselves front and center because they've evolved to believe their power protects them. Humans know better. Our power doesn't lie in muscle, armor, or natural weapons. It's in our awareness and our preparation." "The summit attack," I said quietly, my mind piecing it all together. "You weren't just lucky." "We weren't specifically expecting an attack," Aiden clarified, "but we're always ready for one, always. It's exhausting, honestly, but it's kept our species alive through circumstances that should have wiped us out a dozen times over." I looked at him, understanding dawning. "You're not weak, are you?" Aiden's smile was weary but genuine. "No, Jackson. We're not weak. We're just dangerous in ways the Coalition hasn't bothered to measure." "The test." "This is highly irregular, Analyst Torb," Director Victor KNX rumbled, his secondary eyes narrowing with disapproval. "With all due respect, Director, so are humans," I replied, keeping my tone firm but respectful. "We need empirical data. Theory and historical research can only take us so far." We stood in the monitoring room adjacent to Conference Chamber 12B, surrounded by screens showing multiple angles of the seemingly ordinary diplomatic briefing happening next door. The agenda was supposedly about agricultural trade policies, boring enough that no one would question why they'd been invited, yet important enough that all relevant species would attend. "Ambassador Aiden Harrison approved this experiment?" the director asked. "He doesn't know," I admitted, glancing over at Aiden. "None of the humans know. That's part of the point." Director Victor KNX's respiratory sacs inflated, a movement that might have been a sigh or possibly indigestion. "Very well, proceed. But if this leads to a diplomatic incident, I'll have your frills mounted on my office wall." I activated my comm unit. "Commence Operation Pressure Test." The diplomatic meeting next door had been running for approximately 42 minutes. As anticipated, the 4 human representatives had positioned themselves along the back wall of the chamber, near a service exit. The Drathian delegation dominated the front row, their massive scaled forms occupying twice the space of other attendees. Various other species were spread throughout the room based on their relative status and importance. On my mark, I said, watching the chronometer. 3, 2, 1, execute. A series of carefully orchestrated events began. First, the chamber's lights dimmed unexpectedly. Then a low-frequency vibration rippled through the floor, not enough to cause damage, but enough to be felt. Finally, the emergency alert system activated, blaring a piercing tone followed by an automated voice. Security breach detected. Please proceed to emergency evacuation routes immediately. The reaction was instantaneous and incredibly telling. The Drathians, those mighty warriors, froze completely. Their evolutionary response to uncertainty had rendered them temporarily immobilized, while their brains processed the threat. The Star representatives began their characteristic alarm call, which triggered the defensive gagging reflex of the neighboring methane breathers. The Corvas activated their armored plating with a series of metallic clanks, effectively blocking the nearest exit in their confusion. But the humans, they moved before the automated announcement even finished. Fascinating, I muttered, my gaze fixed on the footage. Without a word exchanged, the 4 humans executed what looked like a pre-established protocol. Ambassador Madison Taylor immediately moved toward the most vulnerable delegates, the silicon-based Vernons, who were beginning to crack with stress. Ambassador Thoron, or Brick as Aiden called him, positioned himself by the service exit, scanning the room with precise head movements. The 2 others moved in coordinated patterns that quickly established a security perimeter. Most remarkably, within 3 seconds, all 4 had pulled out small devices, not weapons, but something tactical in nature, I noted with relief as the humans moved swiftly, producing communication tools and what appeared to be emergency medical equipment. Notice the time differential? I said to the director, my voice calm but eager. The humans responded in under 2 seconds. The Drathians are still frozen at 7 seconds and counting. They're not even looking at each other. The director observed the scene in silence. How are they coordinating? He asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. They're not in the traditional sense, I explained, my excitement making my frills extend despite my attempts to remain composed. They've trained for this. These aren't improvisations. They're executing pre-established protocols designed to maximize their collective effectiveness without needing real-time communication. On the screens, Aiden had moved into the center of the room, projecting his voice with surprising authority for such a physically unimposing species. Everyone remain calm, follow evacuation procedures, prioritize assistance for crystalline and aquatic delegates. The room, which had been spiraling into chaos, began to settle as the humans' commands took effect. I ordered the lights to return to normal. The vibrations ceased, and the emergency alert system powered down with a clear announcement. All clear. This was a drill. Please return to normal operations. The director and I observed as confusion spread across the room, followed by a wave of relief, then indignation. Well, Director Victor KNX said after a moment, that was certainly educational. They'll be furious, I acknowledged, my tone calm. No doubt, I added, particularly the Drathians. The director's primary mouth twisted slightly, perhaps with amusement. Their ambassador is still standing there with his defensive ridges fully extended, quite undignified. I turned the director's attention back to the screens. Look at them now. The 4 humans had seamlessly transitioned back to apparent normalcy, returning their emergency equipment to hidden pockets and resuming their positions along the wall. But I could see it now. The relaxed postures were a facade. Their eyes never stopped moving, scanning, watching. They were constantly vigilant. They knew it was a drill, the director realized. How? I raised an eyebrow. I suspect they didn't know for certain, I replied, but they responded as if it were real, while also assessing additional information. They can hold 2 possibilities in mind simultaneously, genuine threat or false alarm, and they act accordingly for either scenario. The director's secondary eyes blinked thoughtfully. Most impressive for a Category 3 species. Director, I said carefully, my tone measured, I believe it's time we reconsidered that classification. The conclusion. Members of the Galactic Security Council, I announced, doing my best to ignore the weight of every influential figure in coalition space staring at me. The grand chamber of the Security Council was packed. News of the diplomatic drill incident had spread quickly, causing a minor interspecies scandal and generating unprecedented interest in my previously obscure research. I stood at the central podium, surrounded by hollow projectors displaying my data. Behind me sat Director Victor KNX, his face set in its usual grim expression. Scattered throughout the chamber, mostly near exits and along the back walls, were human diplomatic personnel, including Aiden Harrison, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. For generations, we've categorized species based on physical capabilities, strength, natural armaments, toxicity, regenerative abilities, and so on, I began. By these metrics, humans are unremarkable, Category 3 on our threat assessment scale. But my research shows that this classification is fundamentally flawed. I activated a simulation showing the response times from the test. As you can see, human reactions to crisis situations outpace even Category 1 species by a significant margin. Their threat assessment algorithms, what they call instincts, operate at speeds our analysis systems struggle to measure. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. More importantly, I continued, humans display behaviors we've misinterpreted as signs of submission or timidity. Their preference for sitting at the back of rooms, their constant scanning of their environment, their preparedness for the most unlikely scenarios. These aren't weaknesses. They are sophisticated survival strategies honed over thousands of years of evolutionary and cultural development. I displayed footage from the summit attack during last month's terrorist incident. 4 unarmed humans neutralized 12 armed attackers in under 40 seconds, while simultaneously coordinating the evacuation of vulnerable delegates. They did this because they were already prepared. They had already mapped exit routes, identified IEDs, and positioned themselves optimally before the attack even started. The chamber fell into complete silence. Humans don't compete with other species on physical terms, I said, my voice steady. They've evolved a different approach to survival. They anticipate, they prepare. They position themselves not for status, but for strategic advantage. I paused, meeting the eyes of as many council members as I could. They don't sit at the back of our chambers because they're unimportant. They sit there because it's the most defensible position, with the best vantage point. The Drethian ambassador's scales flushed purple with what might have been embarrassment or anger. Are you suggesting these primates have been secretly laughing at our security protocols? He demanded, his voice sharp. On the contrary, came a calm voice from the back of the room. Aiden Harrison stood, his posture relaxed but alert. We're grateful for your protocols, he said smoothly, but we simply supplement them with our own. 2 cycles later, the Security Council formally reclassified humans as Category 1 strategic assets. Their delegation was offered prestigious front-row seating at all future coalition events. They politely declined. As for me, my research earned me a promotion to Senior Analytical Director of Interspecies Security Dynamics. My first official act was to redesign the coalition's diplomatic seating arrangements, prioritizing strategic positioning over status hierarchies. And yes, I changed my own habits too. At the next Galactic Summit, Emily found me setting up my observation equipment along the back wall near a service exit. Don't tell me you've gone full human, she groaned, her antenna twitching with amusement. I adjusted my position to maintain clear sightlines to all 3 main entrances. Let's just say I've developed a new appreciation for strategic positioning. Next, you'll be carrying emergency rations and mapping evacuation routes, she teased. I patted the emergency kit now permanently attached to my utility belt and smiled. Already done. Across the chamber, Aiden Harrison caught my eye and raised his coffee cup in a gesture I now understood was called a toast. I nodded back, one paranoid, constantly vigilant sentient to another. Some might call it excessive. I call it evolution. When the galaxy's strongest species finally realized why humans always sit at the back, we didn't laugh at them. We joined them,